Okay, hi everyone, welcome back. In this exercise, we're going to be working on the vase here. We're going to do two different things. We're going to make a system that can shape the vase. If I go into my geometry nodes here, I'll give you a little preview here. Actually, if I go here, we can, change the shape of our vase using some of these presets that we've got established. And then we're going to texture the vase like I've done with this one here. So the first part, having this procedural vase here, I'm actually going to refer you to a fantastic tutorial by a YouTuber called Retroshaper. And the reason for that, if I go into my geometry nodes tab up here, and I'll just expand this area here, you can see that the geometry nodes part of Blender, which I really want you guys to have a look at because it's a really fantastic area of expansion for Blender in terms of procedural modeling. It's a little bit complicated. It's not too bad, but when making these tutorials, they have to be very, very precise. And because I'm teaching this exercise for the first time as part of this Vanitas tutorial, I'd rather use an existing tutorial that has lots of views and therefore doesn't have any mistakes in it. And you can follow it through start to finish and you'll get this vase. So what you can do now, if you pop over to YouTube, I'll put this link in the description. I want you to look at this tutorial, vase with flowers with geometry nodes. And all you have to do is go up to, I believe, the 9-minute mark, because all we want to do is get to the section where he's finished the vase, and we're not going to do this type of texturing. We're going to do a different type of texturing for our Vanitas exercise. So just do the first 9 minutes of Retroshaper's tutorial, which I'll link in the description, and then you can come back to my video here. Okay, so hopefully you should have something that looks a little bit like this in your geometry nodes setup for your vase. And you should also have in your modifiers menu, where the geometry nodes modifier has gone, some of these different parameters that were coded in right from the beginning that should be in our group input here. So this is sort of what Retroshaper recommends. You can sort of code in some of your variables from the geometry nodes and leave them here as things that can be changed quite easily. And you can see how much fun this is. You can really sort of change your composition in lots of different ways to get a vase shape that you like. Okay, so once you've got your vase there, what I'd like you to do is create a collection here for your vase. So you can do that by clicking on your vase and just pressing M, and you can click New Collection, and that will make one of these folders, and you can just call it Vase. And what I've done is I've put my vase, my original one here, I just called it Vase Simple, and I wrote mods, but I can write modifiers just so we know which one it is, because once we settle on the design here, we might actually want to apply these modifiers and then start working with it as a fixed object. You'll also notice that I've added two other modifiers. So I'm just going to go out of my camera view here by pressing middle mouse, and I'll zoom in. And you can see I've added one modifier here, which is called a solidify modifier. So if I hide this, you can see that this is sort of where the tutorial ended up. And I think I also hid this extrude and join section here, and I simply used my solidify modifier here, and I also turned off some of these shade smooth and so on things here. I didn't really need them. So we can check in class if there's any issues there, but I've turned off this section here, the join and merge by distance, and I also turned off my set position and set the shade smooth. So after you've got your geometry nodes here, this solidify will give it a little bit of thickness. And another thing I added in, which I'm not using at the moment, we'll come back to this when we start to do our 3D printing, is there's a deform modifier here, which can be kind of fun. So before using this, you actually have to apply your modifiers. So what I've done here is I've made a duplicate called Vase Simple Applied. So if I hide this one and show you this one, this is now a vase with no modifiers. So we've lost all of our ability to change the vase, but that also means we can do some other things like texturing and so on. So I'll show you how I've done that. What I've done is I've taken my vase with the modifiers and I've simply pressed Shift D and then left click, so I've duplicated it. So I've got a copy here. So now if I call this Vase Simple Applied 2, so it's just, you know, another version of this, and I'll hide my one with the modifiers. The reason I'm doing this is I always want to keep this one, just in case I change my mind and make a different vase. I've still got this one with all of the original modifiers here. This is what's called a non-destructive workflow. Often it's good to keep some of your previous objects and hide them or put them, as you can see here, I've actually got another folder where if I zoom out, you can see that I've got a whole bunch of other vases that I've been playing around with. And I've put them in this folder called Vase Variants, and I've just turned them off. I'll show you how I did some of these now. Some of these, like shapes like this, actually work really well for ceramic 3D printing. So that's what we're going to do in the prototyping part of this course. So I'm kind of going to keep this folder here for later on. Okay, but let's go back to our Vase Simple Applied. And you can see, because I've called it Applied, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to apply the modifier, the geometry nodes modifier, and start working with this as a fixed object. And I'll just see if it's a shape I like. I'll look back through my camera and I'll go back to my Vase Simple Applied. If you can't see the modifier menu here, sometimes that means you haven't got an object selected that has modifiers. So if I click on the vase, my modifier menu comes back here, the little wrench, and maybe I want my vase to be a little taller, something like that. And now I'm going to hit apply. And once I've done that, you can see the geometry nodes disappear. And if I press tab and go into edit mode, it's no longer that cube that it was underneath the geometry node system. It's now just a vase. So now, if I turn on this simple deform, nothing happens. Okay, why is that? Let's have a look what's going on here. Have I got this? Oh yes, okay, I've got it set to the wrong axis. Oh, okay, it's deforming, but because we're round, we simply can't see it. I think that's what's going on. Yeah, okay. Let me just go back a little bit. I'm just going to press Control Z so you can see what that deform modifier did. I think in order for that to look anywhere decent, we need to have this. Yeah, right. So I'll show you what this is doing. If I turn my rotation resolution down to 3, or maybe 4, and get this square shape, will my deform modifier work? Yeah, now it's a bit more obvious. Okay, so that's what was going on, right? So in that case, actually I can see my deform modifier here, so that was my mistake before, but I couldn't see it. It wasn't because of the geometry nodes modifier. It was actually because I had this rotation set up so high that you're spinning something that's round, so you don't see the spin. Whereas if this is a number where it's kind of more geometric and less round, we can see these rotations. Okay, so that's what that was. My apologies there. Okay, so I'll set this up a bit higher again. I've just put the resolution back up to 50. So I'll probably just turn off my deform modifier because I don't use it. I'm going to apply my geometry nodes, and what I want to do now that we have this geometry applied, is I want to UV unwrap and texture my vase. So we've done this already with the book, and if you remember with the book, we had this question of when we UV unwrap something, do we do a cube projection or a cylinder projection, and so on and so on. So let's just do a little reminder of UV editing and unwrapping. So let's go into the shading menu, and I'm going to make a new texture for the vase. Now I'm just going to remove this old glass texture that I had here, and I'll make a new texture, and let's call it Vase shader 1, something like that. Okay, so as per before, you know, I could give it a color, and there's our color. If you're not seeing the color, it probably means you're in the solid mode. To see the shader, you need to be in either material preview or rendered mode. Material preview is fine. And much like before, I'm going to add in an image texture. And I liked this, you can see in the previous tutorials, I was using this sort of ceramic texture, which I thought looked kind of, it was interesting because that period of Dutch ceramics had a very strong relationship with Chinese ceramics from early trade happening between Europe and China. Very complicated history there, of course. But I thought it kind of was an interesting addition to sort of some subtle storytelling in this picture. So I went online and I looked up something like blue and white ceramic diffuse texture. And if I look in images, there's all sorts of interesting patterns. Now, of course, you can look up really any pattern you want. And depending on the shape of your vase, you might find other patterns that are more interesting, that sort of tell a different story. There's really a lot you can do here. What I did is I downloaded this pattern here, which I thought looked kind of cool. So if I go into Blender, what I can do is I can just either I can just drag that texture straight in and it comes in here, or I can Shift A, and if I just type in image texture, I get an image texture node, and then I simply navigate to that same image, which in ceramic, which one was it? It was number 2, and would have the same thing. Okay, so I can just delete one of these, they should be the same. So now if I put this color here on the base color, let's see what we get. Well, at the moment we get almost nothing. And my guess there is that we haven't done any UV wrapping, and the mapping of this texture is probably just way off. So much like before, let's go into UV editing, and I want to select my Chinese blue and white ceramic from this drop down here, because this is one of the textures we've just added in. And if I click on my, well, I just need to, I can't see anything here. Sometimes if you can't click on things, sometimes I turn off this viewport overlays tab, because sometimes I want to see things without the highlighting and without all of the other little viewport details. But then if you click on something and you can't see what you've selected, there's just this little button here that sometimes I turn off. Okay, so if I click on my vase here and I go into Tab to edit mode and A to select all the faces, it looks like we don't have any UVs at all. And that might be because when we did our geometry nodes, we haven't done any UV remapping there. So with all of my faces selected, I'm going to press U, excuse me, and we've got all of these options now. And when we did the book, we did a cube projection. And so this cube projection, what it's probably going to do is it might look okay from one angle, but I'm sure as we go around, we'll probably find some bits where there are some weird seams and stuff, because what that's basically done, if I go into my island select, is it's made a whole bunch of completely flat projections. So this texture doesn't wrap around, you know, it actually just has all these flat surfaces. So the cube projection is not what we want. So if I select all the faces again by pressing A and press U to unwrap, I want to use a cylinder projection, which hasn't done a great job there. So let's see if we can work out why. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my scale. Control A, apply scale. So now we're 1. Let's try that again. U for unwrap. And if I press cylinder projection, it could be here that the pole is wrong, because it looks like it's wrapping around a cylinder, but perhaps the wrong way. So if we do polar ZY, no, that's no better. Polar ZX, that's no better. Okay, So just let me play with these settings here. Now, we're not getting a particularly great result yet. I'm curious as to know why. If I grab all of these and scale them on the Y, that's starting to get us a little bit better. Okay. Okay, so that's a bit better. Now, one reason we might have a problem, it might be actually that, oh, I think I know the mistake I've made. I didn't mark a seam, and that could be the issue. So if one thing we didn't discuss when we UV unwrapped the cube to make the book is when you UV unwrap something, if you think about it sort of like unwrapping an orange or something, often you're unwrapping a shape that needs to have a blender needs to know where to make a cut or sort of a slit in the object, because if you unwrap an orange, you can't sort of take the peel off without having some cuts somewhere. Or if you think about wrapping up a present or a gift for someone, there's the piece of paper has to be able to fold flat, so therefore there have to be cuts. So what I'm going to do around the back of the object is I'm going to go into edge select mode, and I'm going to, well, first of all, I'm just going to press backslash so I can just see my object. And I'm going to just grab a line. So I'm just pressing Control and left click to select a line here. And I'm going to do right click and mark seam. Let's see if this gives us a better result. I'm going to Control select here, mark seam. And I might just select this whole. Oh, we haven't used our solidify yet, so there's no faces there. Let's just see if that gets us a little bit better. So if I now press U, unwrap cylinder projection. Now I'm going to see if I can correct the aspect. Okay, so there's our correct settings. Okay, that's much better. Okay, so basically I had a couple of things wrong at the beginning. I needed to mark my seam, cut it there, and then I've got correct aspect ticked, but scale to bounds seems to be the setting that I really needed ticked there. Okay, so now let's have a look at our texture. And I'm wondering also, I haven't checked if this is a seamless texture, but I'm going to scale this on the x-axis just to see if I have the texture going all the way around here, will my wrapping look a little bit better? It looks pretty good at the front. It still looks a little, it looks stretched, but also I think some of that texture would look better the other way. I can see my picture looks a little upside down here. I'm going to see if I rotate R180. I kind of like that a little bit better. And I think it still looks a little bit stretched. So I'm just going to play around with this. If I scale it on the Y, basically I'm just trying to find something that kind of looks nice, really. You know, there's a balance of what I do here that's kind of technically correct, and then things that kind of look good. Because you can see sometimes the pattern, you know, that looks squished, that looks stretched, but I'm just seeing a way that the leaves kind of look nice. Okay. Maybe something like, and now I'm just going to look at where kind of looks nice on my object. Something like that I think actually looks kind of good. You might do yours differently. And there we have the basics of our vase texture. And if I go into my shading menu, there's a couple of other things I'm going to play around with. One is I'm just going to play with this roughness setting here. Remember when we talked about some of these settings when we were looking at the skull? Roughness we can think about as, I guess it's almost the opposite to shininess. If something has 0% roughness, in another way, it means it's very, very shiny, right? You can see now this has a lot of reflections on it. If it's very, very rough, those reflections go away. So that's kind of, if it's a ceramic, you know, we know ceramic is kind of shiny. So that I think looks pretty good. And I'm going to turn off my overlay here so I can see my ceramic a little bit better. And there's probably a few other settings we could go into in more detail. I might look up some other tutorials for ceramic shaders. There's probably a few more like nice things we can do. But for now, I think that's pretty good. Now, one other thing I want to check is my vase sitting on the table. If I go up, yeah, okay, that's not too bad. All right, so now let's just go back and look through our camera. View, cameras, set active object as camera. Okay, so now we've got our textured vase, and in this folder, what you should have is your vase where you've applied the geometry nodes modifier. You know, with your solidify, you could make your vase a lot thicker. One thing I didn't really show you was how that worked. So if I just undo that, solidify basically is giving the vase a thickness. And I haven't looked too much at the UV unwrapping on the top here, simply because we don't see it in our render. But if I turn this number to sort of, I don't know, we can make it a little thicker. At the moment it's 0.005, so if I turn this to a 1, it'll get twice as thick. I think where I had it before was kind of nice, 0.5. But yes, if we wanted to sort of UV unwrap the top, basically we'd also want to apply the solidify modifier as well, and now we can see that we have our faces on the top. So what we do again is just, we could even, I'll just do that now, just so you know other ways around it. What we can do is if we select, I'm just pressing Shift and Command to select all the faces in between. I'll go on to just solid mode so you can see what I'm doing a bit more. And you can see that these UVs haven't really been projected at all. They're sort of just this little nothing thing here. So what I could do is I could just unwrap these using a cube projection, and we'll just get a ring. The only issue here is that, you know, if this is a ceramic, some of my ceramic students might know this better, but I'm guessing this part might actually just be white. It might not, it probably wouldn't have the pattern painted on it. So what we could actually do is we could just scale this bit right down and just sort of have it read from the white data here. That might work fine. Something like that to me looks okay. You could sort of maybe get a little more advanced if you wanted to sort of match up this rim here. But yeah, and you can see, you know, if you wanted to project the inside, if at any point, you know, you wanted to have the inside visible, after applying this modifier, the solidify modifier, you'd probably re-project the inside as well, because we can see that's super warped. Okay, so that's it for the vase. But yeah, the final thing I just want to reiterate is that once you've done the vase, I would have a folder where, you know, any other vases you've tried, you know, keep them. They might be interesting things to have later. You should have at least, so I can put this old one in my variants. That's the one I had from earlier on in the tutorial. I'll put that in here. And what I do is I just have 2 here in my main folder. One is the one that we see. That's the one with the modifiers applied. And the other one is, if I hide this, this is our original that still has the modifiers, because you might always want to go back and change something. So just before you apply modifiers, it's a great idea to leave one version with them unapplied. Okay, and then yeah, your scene should be starting to look something like this. You've got a folder with, I called one fossils, where I was putting these objects. I've got a folder with my books in it. I don't know why I didn't put, I could put the skull in the, you know, I could call this something like, I don't know, dead objects, and I could put the skull in here, you know, something just so we kind of know where everything is. Okay, so I'll turn off my vase variants, and I'll just keep my simple applied vase here. Okay, and now we'll move on to the next video, which will be the flowers. Okay, see you all soon.